Hello out there in the cyberlands, and welcome to another episode of Cult Classic Movie Corner. Today I am joined again by Catherine. Thank you so much for coming and watching Brazil.
Yes, thanks for having me on the show.
Always a pleasure discussing movies with you. And I understood that this was your first time viewing Terry Gilliam's Brazil.
Yes, it was. I've heard about the movie for many years. I'd seen trailers and clips. I just never had seen the whole thing.
I can't actually remember when I first saw the movie, but I think it was very early on in my movie collecting career, because I used to blind buy a lot of movies that came out, and I bought Brazil on a Criterion DVD. And in those days, it was kind of like, well, if Criterion puts something out, it's something you need to see, was what I felt about movies back then. So I bought it, and this might have been back in like the early 2000s. And first time I saw it, I just loved it. I loved the whole, just the. It's a movie that's kind of hard to try to sum up in a few words, because there is so much happening in that movie. But I think the thing that resonated with me was just the fact that it was very funny, even though it was very, very like dystopian and bleak, and I like the style of it. And I rewatched it also just a couple of days ago. And I was surprised to find that I did not enjoy it as much as I did like 15 years ago. So what are your like initial reactions to the movie?
So I really loved the production design and just like the costumes, the sets, and I loved the casting. Characters were some of them were really fun, others were kind of boring, but ultimately I think this is a perfect example of the mantra, don't put your universe in front of your characters. Because while the world building is excellent, and we totally get the satire of bureaucracy and technology, it's just a slog to get through. I thought it was really boring because I just didn't find anything compelling about this woman that he's been dreaming about. I was much more interested in, why has he been dreaming about her before he's even met her? But he doesn't even ask himself that question. And the reason they spend like half an hour and all the first half hour of the movie is covering all the consequences of this clerical error. And so I thought, okay, so whatever this case is going to figure into the plot, and it really doesn't. It's kind of there as this extended prologue to explain how our protagonist, Sam Lowry, meets this woman, Jill Layton, and it buys time to splice in the first few dream sequences. So that way when we see her for real at the apartment, it's like, hey, that's the person he's been dreaming about. But the rest of the story, it's like, I thought it was kind of weak. He's just trying to find her because he's in love with her, just because he's been dreaming about her. Not so much, it has nothing really to do with the case. He's not really curious about why he's dreaming about her. And the subplot of there being like a terrorist is, they reveal who the terrorist is later in the movie, but the protagonist doesn't seem to pick up on it, kind of thing, And it's like, okay, the world is interesting, but the narrative is just not there for me for a movie that's like 2 hours, 18 minutes long.
And I actually found the movie to be very stressful. And that's a feeling I did not have when I saw this movie years and years ago. But the whole thing feels like this very long, like a prolonged nightmare. And maybe that's just because now I have grown up. So I've had jobs, I've had relationships, I've had bosses, I've dealt with promotions, paperwork. Of course, as all adults have, you have dealt with like bureaucracy, and that's like the most nightmarish thing about this movie, is just the way the system works. And when you consider how the movie ends, it's awfully depressing, even though it's funny. But basically, the movie tells you that no matter what your dreams are, what you want to accomplish in life, the system is most likely going to just destroy you, or, as in this case, drive you insane.
That's true, but I do like that his insanity at the end is at least allowing him to enjoy this fantasy life rather than being like aware of the fact that he's still in a torture chair and just going to be probably disposed of or whatever. And that whole final fantasy sequence at the very end of the movie made me think of, I think it was the original theatrical cut ending of Blade Runner, where they actually follow Rick Deckard and Rachel to the countryside and the mountains. And that looked just like that, like the setting and everything. I'm like, did he pull that from that kind of thing? Because he's kind of imagining that because it does feel a bit Blade Runner-y in terms of the design of the whole world and the aesthetic and how depressing everything is.
Yeah.
But I did love things like the whole subplot with the cosmetics and the cosmetic surgery, and how the one lady, it keeps going wrong and then she's just in denial about how bad this is. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of funny. He had definitely
like, my complication had a complication.
Terry Gilliam definitely achieved making you want nothing to do with this world, which of course is the point. But yeah, I do like the protagonist, Sam Lowry. He played by Jonathan Pryce. He's really great. And same with
he is the best part of the movie. I think he is an awesome actor. So, and I understood also that this role was actually written with him in mind. So it's really made to fit him.
Yeah, and I love this. A couple of the supporting characters, like Bob Hoskins as the plumber guy. How Sam gives him crap about the paperwork because he's trying to figure out how to get these guys to go away, and then of course they're going to come back and nearly screw him for it. And the De Niro
actually struck me that Bob Hoskins was kind of auditioning for the role of Super Mario, because he turns up in this red cap, and he has a skinny guy with him who could have been like a Luigi character. And they're there to fix the pipes.
Oh, that's exactly what they were thinking when they did. Whoever was in charge of casting Super Mario Brothers were like, "Oh, cool, these guys, they're funny, and they're in this kind of hokey world. And he kind of looks like Mario. Okay, that's what we're gonna do."
Yeah.
Even Robert De Niro's character was so persnickety. He was so odd. Like it almost feels like a cartoon character from that Super Mario type world. How he comes in on this big zip line to like help him out and save the day. Oh, I don't like doing paper, blah blah blah, and then he just takes off like a hero in the night who comes to save you. And then
a plumber Batman.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this guy is so much fun. I would much rather follow him and figure out what's going on with him as opposed to Jill Layton. It's like,
yeah, and you're right about her character, because that's also strange, because when I look back at this movie, I think I felt as a teenager or a young adult, I think I felt more drawn towards like the mystery of this love or what it is. And as an adult, I think I gravitate more towards the realism. And then it's more like, well, she's not even likable. She's very difficult to get along with, and the whole world this is set in feels just like so unromantic and dirty and awful. I would hate to live in that place. In the beginning of the movie, you see the Jill Layton character like taking a bath, and their bath water seems like sludge, and she's sitting there with a toothbrush washing her like a band, not a band-aid, but a bandage that she has around her arm. But still, it's got that Terry Gilliam vibe. Of course, it is a Terry Gilliam movie, but
sure.
I'm not the biggest fan of Terry Gilliam, actually. I find many of his movies tend to be too hectic for me. There's too much going on. He tries to kind of be. He's visually very exciting, but also it can get noisy. So this used to be my favorite movie of his, but I think I'm gonna have to revisit in a while now. Not leaving Las Vegas, but Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, because I have the Arrow edition of that movie. But a lot of his movies are movies that I've come out of and not been like the greatest fan of. What kind of relationship do you have to his other movies?
So the first one of his I saw was Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and while I liked the performances, I thought that was a bit of a drag to get through too, because it's basically the shtick of the two guys are just high on LSD the whole time. It's like, okay, but I thought that joke kind of got old fast. The two movies of his I do like are The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus and The Man Who Killed Don Quixote. But there's definitely a lot going on in both of those films as well. Like you said, there's like not just a lot in terms of like the story and the plots are all over the place, but even literally on the screen, there's so much stuff to distract your attention that what am I supposed to be like? The whole Man Who Killed Don Quixote thing sort of starts out as like a simple to understand, very linear story, and by the time you get to the third act, it's just completely bonkers and just kind of out there with what's going on and very surreal, which is kind of the point. But I do feel, yeah, a lot of this movie kind of hit or miss. Like this one was a bit of more of a miss because I just didn't think there was enough to engage me with it. But yeah, I do like that Terry Gilliam has, his corner of the sandbox to play in, so to speak, because I do like his visual flair that he's able to make some of these movies. Just I don't respond to him as enthusiastically as a lot of other people do, but it's definitely for me more of an acquired taste.
Yeah, I agree, and I think maybe The Fisher King maybe is the movie he's made that's most easily accessible, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure.
Because even though that movie has its special kind of storytelling and there's some out there things there as well, it doesn't fly away with the audience. It's more down to earth. But like 12 Monkeys, everyone is raving and have always been raving about 12 Monkeys. I saw it years and years ago, wasn't that impressed. Watched it last year, still not impressed.
Yeah, I like the performances in that film and the setting, but it is a remake of La Jetée essentially. But it does feel like it's too long for what it is. It just kind of like, okay, it's just because again, that short film that he based it on, I thought was, got the point across so much better. But 12 Monkeys, I admit, it didn't really have as much of his visual flair as he's known for. It's more of a very dour, again, almost like a Blade Runner-y type world, but it doesn't have the whimsy of Brazil or the whimsy of Parnassus or Quixote. And then another more grounded, I guess, accessible film would be his Brothers Grimm movie with Matt Damon and Heath Ledger and Jonathan Pryce again.
Yeah.
That was kind of a fun movie, and it also had visual flair and kind of a neat Gilliam-esque type twist on fantasy.
Yeah, I like that one. I thought that was more balanced than many of his movies because maybe the fantasy setting of it made it more like possible for it just to be the way it was. But there's still a lot of things I do love in Brazil. You were mentioning the way it was similar to Blade Runner, and that's an interesting fact there that when the movie was supposed to be released in the US, the studio really didn't like the movie. So they went ahead and wanted to do a more happy ending, just like they did with Blade Runner. And this made a whole fight between Universal and Terry Gilliam, where he at one point took out a whole page ad in Variety, where he just asked the head of Universal at the time, I forget his name, but he was like, name such and so, when are you going to release my Brazil ? And sign Terry Gilliam, a whole page. And
because wasn't the studio cut like only 92 minutes or something? It was like really short. Yeah. I'm actually curious to see that version because I do feel like in its present format it's too long. I mean, I agree with Gilliam that his somber ending is better. It matches the material more than the happy ending, and it's kind of quasi. If it's as depressing as the ending is, the fact that the character does have a little bit of solace living in his in his mind, kind of at that point, but. I do admit that I've never heard of a studio chop job worse than that. To cut nearly 45 minutes out of the movie is like I've never really heard of that. I mean, yeah, usually director's cuts are only like maybe a few minutes longer, half hour longer. There's a few weeks here and there, but that was like wow, So I do want to see.
I have only seen it the one time, but it is a part of my Criterion edition, and that's the only release of the movie, I believe. And I also think it's full frame, not very good quality, but it's there for like archival reasons. But I think next time I get a hankering for watching Brazil, I think I'm going to pop it in and just see how that movie feels today in like 2021. And I also think it's an interesting thing how my very strong love for this movie has now suddenly turned into me seeing it in a very different light, because it was okay watching it, but I used to think this was like a masterpiece, and I don't feel that way after watching it now. Like I said, it stressed me out. It's like all this red tape, all these difficulties when Sam Lowry comes into his apartment, and he is never allowed to rest or to sleep, because when he comes, there's either an error or like central services are there, like fucking up his apartment.
That was another thing I loved, the Ian Holm character, and just how incompetent and lazy his boss is. Like, one little thing goes wrong and he's having like a conniption and everything. It's like, okay, he's pretty good.
Yeah, and also his name being Kurtzman. I started thinking about someone else named Kurtzman.
I did too.
I was kind of like, oh, I need to take a picture because he's standing outside his office and it just says M. Kurtzman. And in my mind, I was already hearing like, oh, the clan of Kurtzmans, they've been fucking up for years. But yes, one thing this movie truly does have going for it is an amazing cast. From like Jonathan Pryce as Sam Lowry, you have Robert De Niro in this zany role that's very out of character for him, Ian Holm, Michael Palin, Bob Hoskins, Catherine Hellman. There's just cool actors showing up all over the place in this movie, and I do think it's very well played. I also quite like the soundtrack for this movie, made by, I do believe, Michael Kamen. And of course the whole Brazil song that goes through this movie. I also heard like a trivia tidbit that said that the reason this movie is named Brazil is no other reason than the fact that the other titles he tried for it didn't work, and he just ended up with Brazil. So it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, it's an atrocious title for this film on a multitude of levels. It's like, okay, it makes you think of Brazil and that country and that landscape. It's like, no, that's not what this is. It's like, okay, you're playing the song, so what? You know, it just feels really lazy. I remember also that De Niro initially wanted to play the Jack Lind character, but then they ended up giving it to Michael Palin instead, because I guess he'd already promised him that role. I think that would have been interesting as well. But that was another thing, that the movie gets a bit surrealist towards the end, where they rescue him from the torture chair, and then he appears in all the papers, like he gets eaten alive by it, and that's when you're aware that, okay, this must be a dream or a simulation or something. Like, oh yeah, it's a dream. And I thought that was kind of interesting, because you're not sure exactly where that final dream started. You just know where it ends, with him just being in the chair still. When Jack's about to torture him, he takes the mask off and is trying to be sympathetic, like telling him to shut up or whatever. Don't blow my cover type thing, you know? Because there really is no resolution to that part of the story about Jack Lind leading the underground movement or whatever. And then you have other great homages to just how bad bureaucracy can be, like with when he finally gets promoted and he has to share the desk between the wall with the other guy, and for some reason he doesn't have his own computer, even though he's supposed to be doing the same work as the other guy. So he has to keep barging in and using it. I just feel that,
and the fact that they actually share a desk between just two walls, and if you look at the back of the office, they also have just half a poster each of like the Ministry of Information.
I feel, I just feel that there's also too many allusions to how bad the bureaucracy is. Like, we get it, especially in the beginning with the first half hour of how that all goes, and I felt that also kind of bloated the runtime. Like when he has the first gag with the sharing the desk, okay, I get it, but they keep revisiting that over and over again, and that's another thing which I just kept checking my watch over and over again, waiting to It's like, is there something that's going to help take this story up? And it never really does.
No, I do agree. I do agree about that. I'm kind of put down by the fact that it wasn't as amazing as I remembered it being. It used to be like one of my favorite movies, and it feels weird when you go in and watch something that you have these memories of having loved all your life, and you sit down and it's just like, oh, okay, this is very long, it's very stressful, why are these people so stupid, why do they accept the way things are? But that's just the thing about growing as a person, because movies are, as any art form, they're there for interpretation, and when you interpret something, you're bringing your own life with you. So as I've changed, my perception of the movie has of course changed. But I think still it's a very interesting thing, having went from like absolutely loving a movie to thinking it's mediocre at best.
Yeah, I've had that experience before too, and because this was my first exposure to the film, I guess it didn't feel as shocking. Like, I imagine seeing this type of satire in 1985 would have been quite the shock, because even though aesthetically it's familiar to Blade Runner, Blade Runner wasn't about red tape bureaucracy, where this one is. And so I can see how, like you're mentioning, that this is a really stressful film to watch, and that I could tell that it's not a surprise that this film Brazil inspired a bunch of knockoffs afterwards, like, Dark City and Super Mario Brothers, that whole world that they live in, and which is like the antithesis of the whole Mario Brothers uppity type game. And it's like, what, so I feel that I get why this was really big in its day, but watching it now, it's like, okay, you got the pieces are there. It's just, I don't feel there's enough of a oomph to it. And maybe if it was shorter, it would be a bit more tolerable. But again, I think the thing I was most intrigued by was not just the fact that he was dreaming about her before he met her, but the fact that every time he was dreaming, he would dream the next chapter in that same dream, like a book almost, which usually doesn't happen when people dream, which made me think, is there some VR simulation thing going on here? Like, is this a dream? Is this him, like, a simulation that he's dreaming at night? Like, I was interested in that aspect of it a lot more than her, but the movie doesn't really address any of those things. It's like, oh, you're just supposed to accept it and just kind of roll with it. Like, okay.
I do really like the dream sequences. I think they're very well made and very interesting, and the whole flight suit they built for him. I was actually sitting there when I watched this movie now, and I was like, I want to watch a whole movie about his dream sequences, because that seems like a much more movie that's made for my aesthetics right now. But that's not going to happen. But they were very, very well made, and I think they're there more for the symbolism, because it's just his escape of dreaming of another life where he can actually be a hero, where he has a love interest. He needs to feel like he can save someone, and by saving someone else, kind of save himself from his life, I think.
Right, and I get it that he would have to fail given the themes of the movie, but even in the end, it's only in the dream sequences where he's like really being the hero. I felt that the climax should have had him believing that he was on the verge of being a hero, like in real life, like literally trying and then failing. But it never builds to that crescendo. It just kind of it starts going in that direction, and then he's suddenly in the torture chair, and it's like, oh, we're at the end of the movie. It's like,
it does, however, still have one of my all-time favorite lines of dialogue, and that is when he comes back after having killed his dream girl in the system. So it seems that she's passed away, deleted, dead, gone, and he tells her that she's dead. And from underneath the bed covers, she asks him quite directly, "Care for little necrophilia?" That line is it's so good. It's well,
yeah, that was great. Another thing, after he chases her down, and you have the whole car chase thing, and she doesn't, she eventually gets rid of him. I was curious as to how she found him back at his apartment and why she sought him out again. Because at first, when they get into bed, it seems like, okay, is this real or not? Because there's like a mixture of both. Like there's the dream sequence where he's in bed with her, and then there's the scene where they go to his mom's apartment because he knows she's not going to be there, and they have like their frisky stuff there. I'm like, why is she suddenly interested in this guy when she so vigorously tried to shake him off earlier in the day during the whole truck chase thing? And that also kind of felt a bit of a disconnect for me. That all of a sudden she likes the guy now. I'm like, okay, and so that's why I was wondering: is this like a dream within a dream, or is it?
No, and I've when I tried to read a few like discussions and find some other material on this, I saw that a lot of people are discussing at what point in this movie he kind of starts losing his mind and what's real and what's not real. So I guess I don't remember if there's a commentary track on the Criterion release, but if there is, I think that one would probably be a very interesting one to hear what Terry Gilliam thinks about what's happening on screen throughout this movie. It goes without saying that he's a visionary person when it comes to imagination and making movies, and I love his work on the old Monty Python stuff. But like I said a bit earlier in this conversation, I often find it very hard to kind of get into his movies. He has a lot of huge fans, and I'm just not one of them. Sorry if you're watching the show, Terry. You're not, but that's okay. I'm curious to see what he makes next. It's been a while since I've seen anything he's made. I'm not sure if I've seen the one you mentioned, liking Dr. Parnassus. Is that the one with Heath Ledger?
Yeah, and the one where they, at the time he died, they'd filmed all the sequences which took place in the real world, which Ledger played. And then after he died, they filmed all the mirror world sequences, and they got Colin Farrell, Jude Law, and Johnny Depp to play those versions. That's actually a really great movie. It's so quirky and out there, and the twist towards the end is like, oh wow. But I highly recommend that one. That was something special.
And the Don Quixote movie is about his failed attempt at making a movie about Don Quixote, or is it kind of like both?
There was a documentary years ago called Lost in La Mancha, which was the documentary about the failed production. This is him finally getting to make the movie that he wanted to make all the time ago. Yeah. And they got Jonathan Pryce to play the actor who played Don Quixote. They got Adam Driver, because the basic premise of it is that Adam Driver plays this kind of young, cocky filmmaker. He's filming this commercial for this expensive fragrance out in wherever they are. I can't remember where, somewhere in Spain. And he recognizes the area that he's shooting in is where he shot his first student film. And even though he seems really, he's so disconnected, it seems, from this rich, snobbish type world that he's in. And so he's kind of intrigued to go back and visit the people that he had made this original movie with. And he comes upon Jonathan Pryce, who was the local guy, who was the actor who played Don Quixote in his student film, except he finds that the guy is genuinely delirious and believes he's actually Don Quixote, and has believed that for years, ever since being in the film. And they go on this crazy odyssey through the countryside, and it's just eventually just gets more and more surreal. But I thought it was a pretty good movie.
He does seem to like movies about people going on some kind of odyssey or not. Kind of like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas as well is kind of a very trippy but very epic road trip. So yeah, well, I guess that's where we are with Brazil. If I'm gonna score it, I'll give it 2 out of 5 heating ducts.
I also give it 2 out of 5.
I had once upon a time. I actually had a T-shirt with the Central Services logo on it, and that's a cool thing though. So I don't know if there's any particular stuff in the chat. I'll have a look. Scotty saying ahoy, just sneaking a peek during his break. Big Scotty. He's gone all grown up and got himself a job. Good for him. Todd Michael says hello to all.
Hey, Todd Michael.
Sends a super sticker from she's at New York Comic Con at the moment.
Yeah.
Darius Munchausen says, hail at the Phantasmagorium show and hail right back at ya. He's cool. He's updated his RoboCop cowboy hat logo. I always like that one. He sends a hail to and to Todd Michael and Scotty and me and you and everybody. That's a good thing. And Steve in the background here is saying Terry is writing the new Time Bandits TV series right now. Oh, I had not actually heard that there was going to be a Time Bandits TV series.
I think I read about it a week ago. I didn't know he was doing it, but that's kind of cool.
That's kind of cool, and that should be interesting to see how that premise gets updated. It's been years and years since I saw Time Bandits. I also have that in the shelf back here in an Arrow release, but that's also a movie that I've kind of it's kind of like I felt like I should love it more than I do because it gets mentioned so often. But I'll just have to give it a.
I have felt that way about a lot of movies too. People are like, oh, you have to love this. This is such an important movie, blah, blah, blah. And I watch it and it's like, okay, I get why it was important in its day, but then I watch it again and again. Like, it's like I'm lying to myself that I enjoy it when I really don't. Like Blade Runner, for instance. I really didn't like the Rick Deckard character in that movie. I mean, I get the point. It goes on this character arc from being like an asshole, washed up alcoholic jerk to being a guy who's actually understanding and sympathetic to the replicants. But I just found Roy Batty to be such a more compelling character that, he shows up 25 minutes in, he's in it for 5 minutes, and then he disappears for 45 minutes. And it's like, I just found it up until the climax that it was a bit of a slog to get through that movie too, even though the setting is great and the actors are all great.
Well, he does steal the show kind of in that movie. He is amazing. Rutger Hauer is amazing in that movie. But, Halloween season is upon us, as it is every year. So I think for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be focusing on probably cult movies more in the horror genre. And I picked one that I'm going to see next, and I've made a little outro. So for now, I'm just going to thank Catherine for coming and discussing Brazil with me. You'll probably be back for other shows, which I'm happy about. I want to thank those who participated in the live chat, and hopefully we'll see you guys later. So that's it for today. Stay cult and give us a like.
Yes, thank you.